very respected speaker of this evening, Madam Vanitha Patnaik from Kolkata, Secretary of SARC, CA Panaraj, my good friend and Regional Council Member C. Abhishek Murali, participants of this evening program, very good evening to all of you. Friends, it gives me a great satisfaction to once again join with you all for this important program relating to new opportunities for our members. Yes, you all are aware, SARC has been arranging continuous programs almost all the working days on various innovative topics, but some of the topics will be very unique and specialized topics. But only very few of our members utilizing their knowledge and exposure for those kind of specialized services. Today is one such topic, the Competition Act, opportunity in merger and acquisition. We have a great opportunities in these areas, but very few members specializing in these kind of assignments. Keeping this in our mind, we as SARC organized this excellent program for the benefit of our members to create awareness about these kind of areas of practice and equip ourselves to serve better to the stakeholders. Today we have with us a very good speaker sharing her knowledge and experience with our elite professional gathering through this virtual mode. Today we are in one more enlightening evening session, and I am sure that everyone would add to their thoughts on this subject immensely. On behalf of members of this great region, I welcome Madam Vanitha Patnaik to this virtual program. My sincere thanks to her for accepting our invitation and addressing us. I also welcome each one of the members who are all participating this evening program. I am sure the exposure that the participants will get on the subject of presentation by the speaker and her expertise will broadly update our understanding on the subject of discussion today. Before into the technical topic, I request C. Abhishek Murali, Regional Council Member, to introduce speaker of this evening. Over to Abhishek.
A very, very warm good afternoon to one and all present here. Chairman of SARC, Secretary Sir, and the esteemed speaker of the day, Ms. Vanitha Patnaik. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to be here to address the members and the privilege of introducing the speaker. In fact, the choice of today's topic is, as the chairman rightly said, is not something regularly discussed, but it's a niche area of practice and an emerging area of practice. You see, normally, as far as the competition is concerned, or you take mergers and acquisitions, there are certain laws which help prevent it from being taken advantage of. For example, you have the Companies Act, you have the SEBI Act, which takes care of certain aspects of mergers. If you take the Companies Act, the interests of the secured creditors are taken care of. If you take the SEBI Act, it protects the interest of the investors, but nothing protects the market itself. And this is where the Competition Act comes in. And whenever there's a merger and acquisition, let us assume two of the largest companies. Now there are very, very few flights which are operational. So let us assume the existing flights all come together and they merge and they form one company. And they say for one price ticket to go from Delhi to Chennai, you have to pay 1 lakh. So there is nobody who is going to control this, and this is where the Competition Commission comes in. And I think it's a very, very important act. It's an important, session that we're having today, because there exist opportunities for chartered accountants in this area, especially in mergers and acquisitions. So for that, we need a very, very good speaker who will enlighten us on these aspects. And we have Ms. Vanitha Patnaik, who I will now have the pleasure of introducing. Ms. Vanitha Patnaik is an Assistant Professor of Law in NUJS and has been teaching since 2003. Her subject specialization is corporate insolvency, insurance, mergers and acquisitions, international investment laws, and laws of banking. She was the first ever Indian student to study at the Summer Academy at the International Tribunal for Law of the Seas for Uses and Protection of the Sea, legal and economic and natural science perspectives in Hamburg in Germany, and she did it with a full scholarship. Then she did her Masters of Law and Business Management from a very, very leading law school, where again she was granted full academic scholarship. And she has been regularly contributing there. She has delivered lectures both in India and abroad, and among some of the institutions which she has lectured are Hamburg University in Hamburg, very, very leading university in fact. She has experience as a consultant to various leading international companies and leading Indian companies, and has been a contributor to many industrial publications and academic publications on a range of subjects like insurance to arbitration. In fact, she heads the Center of Financial Laws for the Mediation Clinic at INDUJS. She has extensive experience in corporate training like RTI, drafting, economic offenses, employment law, cyber laws, mediation, etc. And she has been responsible for designing various courses of training for senior executives in some of the leading companies that you can think of, Indian companies like Durgapur Power Plant, HPCL, West Bengal Power Development Corporation, Swami Vivekananda State Police Academy, and many more. I think her pedigree speaks for itself from this profile. Thank you so much, ma'am, for accepting our invitation to be here to address our members. We welcome you and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Abhishek. Thank you, sir. So should I start now, or what's the process? I can start.
Yes, madam,
now.
you can start. Yeah, you can start.
Okay. So I'll start my screen share, and I can see that there are some 52 attendees already here. Yeah. So I've minimized the camera and I'm doing the screen share. I hope I'm visible. If not, just let me know. Okay, because I will not be able to do both. Apparently, I can either have the screen or the cameras on. And Abhishek, thank you for such a kind introduction. It sounds really great, but when doing it just seems very ordinary. You know, you just carry on doing one by one. So in a day's work, like they say. So the topic today that has been given to me is of competition, and particularly mergers and acquisition, like the opportunities for chartered accountants. Now, as a person from legal background, I'll try to walk this very fine line wherein I'll try to take law along with the mechanics of merger and acquisition. Very rarely I get such opportunities. Mostly I get opportunities of teaching competition law, and which is very easy. You see, teaching law to lawyers or law students is very easy, but teaching law in a non-law manner to accountants can give me easily sleepless nights. Okay, so is my screen visible, or
not yet.
Now?
No. Yeah, now is yeah. Yes.
Okay. So this is the topic of the day, and let me do something. Let me just pull this to the other side. Yeah. So to start with, I'll just explain the basics of competition law. Now, when we speak about competition law, what we understand is the various business forms that all of you are aware as chartered accountants, be it your private company, your public limited company, or any other form of business form, joint ventures that we have in India, and we recognize them. So when two or more businesses want to combine, and when they combine, they create a synergy in the market. Sometimes this synergy is beneficial to both them as well as the market, then everything is well and good. When the synergy is just beneficial to them and not so much for us as consumers, that is where the Competition Act steps in. So the whole idea of Competition Act is not to stop business, it's not to regulate business, it's not to regulate even the market. It is just to provide a balanced playing field amongst the various players in the market, so that as a consumer, I would have a right of choice. I can choose between two or more offerers of the same business, that I can make a healthy choice. So this protection of the consumer to provide a choice has been evolving in India to a very large extent. We are still in a very evolving state. I would not say we are still in the mature state. We are still evolving as we go, because post the 90s, post the liberalization, we had the MRTP, which was fairly draconian. It was very adverse to the market. It got converted to Competition Act. So essentially, what right now the Competition Commission of India does is it looks into trying to balance the market to enable the consumers to have a healthy choice in any and every aspect. So I'll not get into the nitty-gritties of it. I'll just do the horizontal, vertical, and then I'll straight away get into the mergers acquisitions. I'll not do the cartelization. I will not do the abuse of dominant position because they would take away a lot of time. But if required, if anybody has a question, feel free to ping. I think Abhishek can help me out with regard to the questions. You can simply, Abhishek, would you, if you don't mind, as and when the question comes, if you can just intervene and ask, that would be beneficial.
Ma'am,
Now,
I will.
yes.
Shalva Kumar or myself will be doing, madam.
All right.
No worry, no worry.
Anyone, sir. So, but for all that I have said, none of the acts, be it your Companies Act, be it your Competition Act, they actually define what a merger is. So while they say that the businesses may combine through mergers, businesses may combine through acquisitions, or they even may set up joint ventures, they do not tell what a merger is, what an amalgamation is. Amalgamation is perhaps even defined, but merger is not so much defined. The definition of it, you'll find it in the Income Tax Act. So the acquisitions is, whenever you have an acquisition, it is usually through the purchase of shares or purchase of assets of any target company. So the acquiring company would either want to purchase it straight away or on a rolling basis. That is where your takeover code steps in, and this shareholder rights, veto rights, your board control, all of that is usually taken care of by the Companies Act. So a merger is where two or more companies come together and they form a new company. You can have a merger, you can have a demerger, but each of these things the Companies Act provides with provisions with regard to a scheme of arrangement has to be developed with all the reasons, and you have the terms and conditions and the approval of the both the creditors and as well as the shareholders. So you have your special resolution and all those things. So that is the basic foundation or the starting point of merger. What are the applicable laws for when a business wants to get into a merger or amalgamation? For all filing requirements, if it's a public limited company, your LODR and others, the disclosure requirements, everything that comes, Companies Act, your securities law, state-wise as well as central, you have the labor and the state stamp laws, and then you have the competition law. So this is the only part that we will be dealing with. That is the effect of competition law on combinations, that is your mergers and acquisitions. Competition Act in its preamble at the beginning, it states that it is an act which aims to provide an economic development of the country with prevention of practices which will have an adverse effect on competition. Now, this adverse effect on competition is something which I would like all of you to keep in mind. So this is your adverse effect on competition is something that we will be dealing with frequently because mergers does a circumambulation around this. So every time you have a merger, you have to show that, okay, we are not going to have a adverse effect. Now, the whole idea of preventing this adverse effect is to sustain competition. As I said, the entire idea of competition law is not to regulate the market or not to regulate the competitors or to regulate the players. It is essentially to provide a choice. It's a protection of choice to sustain the competition in the markets. So its whole aim revolves around protection of interest of consumers and to ensure freedom of trade carried out by other participants. Sometimes this is taken too literally, like similarly like SEBI, when it takes investor protection to a little bit extreme ends. But all is fair when you see that, okay, had it not been for CCI, the level playing field perhaps would not have been that level. And it's so very easy for companies to, get into some sort of agreement, spoken or not unspoken, to keep their pricing at a certain pegged up level, whereby there is no true choice that would be available to the consumers. Now, when we speak of competition, particularly lawyers, when we speak of competition as restraint in trade. This whole thing, we trace it back to 1890s. That is the US Sherman Act, which was brought about particularly to balance out the economic and the political field at that point of time. It is the first antitrust law that was brought about, which introduced a restraint in trade, which introduced democracy in the market. This was then carried forward in the Europe as well. You have the sorry. So in Europe, you have the Paris Treaty, the Rome Treaty, the Lisbon Treaty. So each country took it forward, so did India. So in India, we have had, as I said, we had a lot of economic turnarounds, like, the bends, that as we call them. We had the 1948, where you had a huge impetus with industrialization. 1956 year, so industry was developed a lot. In the 90s, we had liberalization. So in the mix of these markets, in 2002, we got Competition Act. So Competition Act is an offshoot of your MRTP. MRTP was very, very restrictive. While it also had the same aims, it restricted monopoly, it restricted unfair trade practices, but it was very criminal in application, in the sense that it did not choose to balance the market, it chose to punish the participants of the market. And well, that did not go too well, so we had the Competition Act. Now, competition law, as we speak of, you can easily break it into these three types. Agreements that can be anti-competitive, market where one player is so big that that player can essentially play around with its dominance, abuse of dominance by either underwriting or underplaying, pricing or underpricing, or putting the conditions of such a manner that the competition does not withstand. So essentially, there would not be left any competition for that matter. The last bit is your mergers and acquisitions. So this is like, before it affects the market, let's take care of it. That is the section 5. The section 5 looks into how, before the companies get into mergers or get into amalgamation, how it will impact the market. So it's already an in anticipation regulation, and this is where the role of chartered accountants is the maximum, because all the thresholds, all the trigger points, they come for the announcements that to the CCI, they come here. So your section 5 and others, they enable proactive disclosure by the companies. They essentially make it mandatory for the company to assure the Competition Commission that somewhere we will not have an adverse impact on the market. So I'll just get into the last bit. Before I get into the last bit, I'll explain for a few minutes the horizontal and the vertical agreements and how they impact the market, just so that we flow with it easily. So this is, when we speak of anti-competitive agreements, we have both horizontal and we have vertical. Horizontal, when we speak, it is like, manufacturer to manufacturer, where they sit or don't sit, speak or don't speak, yet come to a more or less a ballpark figure where the pricing would be fixed. So this is the other name for cartelization. And the vertical agreements are sometimes far more serious than your horizontal, because horizontal, you can inform, you can catch it, you can sniff it out. But vertical agreements, because they are taking control vertically from top to below, it's fairly difficult to establish their impact until unless it grows to such a size that it's very visible. So it is the disclosures by the companies themselves that helps the CCI to regulate it. So mostly it is the vertical agreements that gets into the regulation bit. Horizontal, yes, but mostly it is the vertical. So as I was saying, this concept of agreement is like, the core part of your Competition Act. And when you speak of horizontal agreements, or when you speak of vertical agreements, we speak of agreements that are not strictly permissible. It is, if it is permitted, then CCI would not have to step in. So it comes either in the exemptions list or it comes in the permitted list, and there is no issue. It is only where the agreement have an adverse effect, that is where CCI would step in. So this is the point with regard to the vertical agreement. So whenever a company starts functioning at different levels, and at each level it starts having an impact on the market and the end product of the market, that is where the CCI will step in, not otherwise. So not all vertical agreements will draw the attention, neither will all horizontal. Horizontal, we speak of it a lot more, primarily because it's a lot more visible. It's visible in the sense with regard to the product, the end product being similar, the pricing being similar, the marketing strategy being similar. The geographical market would be different, of course, but sometimes they are also the same or similar markets. So horizontal agreements are a lot more visible than vertical, but it is vertical that gets a lot more regulated upon. So when we speak of horizontal, as I said, we speak a lot on horizontal as compared to vertical. You have your price fixing, you have your market allocation, that this is my market, this is your market. You have bid rigging, which is very, very rampant and common. And the last but not the least, that is your output restriction. So each one of these can be a part of your horizontal. So particularly output restriction is something that is very troubling and troublesome. Bid rigging is absolutely prohibited, and yes, it still happens, and you require a very basic circumstantial evidence. You do not require an absolute foolproof evidence. Now let me just explain what it means. So the standard of proof that CCI looks for is preponderance of probability, which means even if you have snippets of conversations recorded or messages recorded or emails, that would be enough. So circumstantial evidence is taken. It is not it has to be compact, bulletproof, or it should be absolutely watertight. So whenever you have a preponderance of probability, it just means even the most vague, ambiguous evidence would be taken towards against the complaint. So the complaint would be like, yes, taken recognition of, even if there is circumstantial evidence. So this assessment of adverse effect on the market is something that's based upon this preponderance of probability. And if CCI does latch on to such a complaint, and basing upon this preponderance, if it does find out that there is some scope of your horizontal agreement or even a vertical agreement, but mostly this is restricted to horizontal. So it applies or levies a penalty which would be 3 times the profit for each suspected year of horizontal. Or if it cannot figure out the duration of time, then it would be 10% of the turnover for each year of continuation. So whichever is higher, that penalty would get applied in. So the penalty provisions are very stiff, primarily to deter. They're more of a deterrence than anything else. Now let's come to vertical. Now, as I was saying, the vertical agreements are very different from your horizontal agreement because they're difficult to establish, because primarily they link the distribution or the supply chains with the market, and assessing a possible impact on the market based upon the vertical agreements is very difficult. Most of these vertical agreements would be an essential feature of any business. So be it goods or be it services, there is always a chain that is present before the final product is out in the market. And be it, if you talk of manufacturing, be it from the gathering of raw material to the final product, so that at each level you would find that there would be some forms of agreement. And if one company, the company that is in a position to buy up the entire vertical chain, does buy up, then yes, it would have beneficial effect as well as it can have adverse effect on the market. It is only in the adverse effect that CCI will step in, not if it is just a beneficial interest. Beneficial interest, of course, to the business and sometimes to the market as well. Now, vertical agreements, as I was saying, they are very, very important, and particularly to regulation of competition law, you have to have a very close look at any sort of vertical agreements. So you have both inter and intra brand vertical agreements. When you're talking about inter brand, then it's something as simple as your distribution agreements, or where you say you have to have a minimum purchase threshold. Intra brand is where you say this is an exclusive deal. The company says I have an exclusive franchisee where only I will be able to deal with this product. So all of those things would come as your intra brand, and they would have an effect of creating barriers. So vertical agreement, because of these intricacies, is not only fairly difficult to establish that they have an adverse effect, but also they would be having a much more pervasive impact on the market. So I think it was 2 years back, before this COVID, we had an issue with regard to McDonald's. So you had one exclusive franchise holder who had a fallout with the McDonald's owners, and then you had that case, and now that has got resolved, so McDonald's is open all over again. So that is just an example that I'm trying to give you. We have had many such exclusive agreements. We have had exclusive agreements with regard to your iPhones, and all of those do reach, as long as they prohibit or create a restrictive market, they do reach CCI. Now, what can CCI do? CCI, what it does is it sets up customized guidelines. It sets up guidelines which evaluates different kinds of vertical agreements. It cannot and should not have a thumb rule approach where one rule will apply to all. It does set up your thresholds, which means that it creates a basic minimum threshold limit wherein certain type of agreements would get automatically strained out. All of this would go to analyzing whether an agreement would have an appreciable adverse effect on competition in the market. So that is the most important test that CCI always applies to any of its market participants. So this test of AAEC is a mandatory test wherein the beneficial interest has to accrue to the consumer, notwithstanding what you do with your production line, notwithstanding what you do with your distribution line. When we speak of beneficial interest, it's not just about pricing, it's also about having a choice, an option of different players in the market should still be available. So this AAEC, that is your appreciable adverse effect on the market or on competition, is a mandatory test that gets applied by CCI. So this was one of the cases that I thought I'll put in, but I'll come to this case at the end of this session, wherein we can discuss few other cases as well. Let's just move on from vertical agreements to the different names that we have for vertical agreements. So these names are common names that we have. You have monopoly, you have oligopoly, you have monopolistic competition, and you have perfect. So the last bit is the aim of CCI. So anytime a company has a high market concentration, that is where CCI needs to step in. So if you see in a monopoly, so you will have only one single company which has such a strong presence that it by default creates barriers of entry to other competitors. Now it depends upon the industry, it depends upon the market, and it depends upon the final product. So let's say, for example, in your exploration and production for oil and gas, you cannot have too many players. It's a very restricted because it's a very deep pocket market. Similarly, if you have a FMCG product, you cannot have a monopolization of a market in an FMCG product, because that is a product that is consumed by a greater population, and hence they would need to have a better choice. So depending upon the market, depending upon the final product, this definition gets applied. So even though loosely we might call yes that it is a monopoly, or loosely we might call it yes it's a collusion, it's an oligopoly, what happens in fact is, depending upon the market, you would say yes it is an oligopoly, or it is not an oligopoly, or it is a collusion or a cartelization. So these are the different names that is given to either an interdependent market or a collusive market. So wherever you have a collusive market, that is where your adverse effect starts stepping up. And the moment you have an adverse effect on competition, you would have the CCI stepping in. So this is now coming to mergers and acquisition. So far, are there any questions with regard? So what I've given is a general overlay of the competition law in itself, or the Competition Act. Now I will be moving into mergers and acquisition.
I'll share
So
my
section
screen.
5. Pardon?
I'll share my screen. Is my screen visible? Just one question. Minute.
Yes. Okay. 1 second.
Is my screen visible?
Yes, yes, it is. It is visible very much. So does competition law extend to individual and firms and individual businesses? Yes, it does. It does. It does not make a distinction between private limited and public limited companies. What it simply sees is the impact that it has on the market in the sense of its turnover. I'll be coming to it in the bit. So the trigger points are basically how much profits you make, or how much turnover you have in any given financial year. So let's say if you have two very mega companies coming together in such a situation, doesn't matter if it is a public limited or a private limited company, CCI will step in. Like you had the Microsoft case in EU, you had many such similar cases all across. So they were forced to break up their companies primarily because of their activities which did not permit other players to bring in their own product onto their platform. So Microsoft is a very interesting case where it had actually had to go in for a demerger primarily because of EU competition law. If time permits, I'll definitely discuss that. But yes, so competition law does extend to businesses, but not necessarily to unregistered businesses. So if you have a one-person company, by default, the threshold of one-person company will not allow you to get into the framework or the net of CCI. So you will have to essentially be a much bigger company in order to fall into the threshold of CCI. Now, Tata Sons is a private limited company. Given that, will they? Sorry.
I'll stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, I'll just share it. I'll just share it. Yeah. So given that, yes, if they get into any agreements, then it would, of course, it would bring them. They would need the permission of CCI. So when we speak of mergers and when we speak of acquisitions, they are two very different things. Mergers is where two companies voluntarily come together and acquisition is where one company goes ahead with a buying spree and purchases small companies or other companies. This is just, I'm simplifying it primarily for ease of understanding, nothing else. I do understand that I'm simplifying it to ad infinitum, but that is just for explanation purposes. And please bear with me because I'm mostly used to teaching young kids, so they'll be what, 20, 21, 22. So the way I explain to them will be my default mode. And I do understand that, well, this is a mature audience, but still, please, I ask for your indulgence. So when we speak of mergers and acquisitions, so here what we have, pardon?
Slideshow. Are they asking for slideshow? As of now, it's a normal mode. So possible.
You want a slideshow? Okay,
Yes.
let me see if I can do it. 1 second. 1 minute.
The display settings, you just
No, it's yeah, it's coming as duplicate. This is the problem. That's why I was not doing it.
Once you click on that one, there is option the drop.
Because I have duplicate screen.
No, you
What should I do? Tell me.
Yeah, under display settings, there is a drop down, right?
Slideshow.
Duplicate slideshow. Yeah, click on that.
Duplicate slideshow. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, now it's a full screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as I was saying, your mergers acquisition is dealt with under your section 5 and 6. And the regulatory body or the regulatory authority, as we speak of, is your CCI, that is your Competition Commission of India. Their only job is to review and assess all pending mergers and all pending acquisitions in India. So your Companies Act will give you the scheme of arrangement. Companies Act will give you all the details on how to hold the shareholder meeting, on how to take the consent of the creditors. Your securities law, that is SEBI regulations, they will tell you how to do the listing requirements, how to do the disclosure requirements. But at the end of the day, after doing all this due diligence, it is the Competition Commission which will have to essentially give you a go ahead. So if it does not give you a go ahead, there is no possible way that the merger can take effect, which means there would be a stop clock the moment you do a file application, or you cannot conduct any business, you cannot go ahead with the merger, or you cannot go ahead with the amalgamation till you get all clearance from the Competition Commission. So there are certain triggering events. So these triggering events are the events that I'll be discussing right now. So as I was saying, most important is for any form of merger or any form of acquisition that they should not exceed any jurisdictional thresholds. They should not have taken benefit from any exemptions that have been notified before any transaction is completed. So they will have to wait out for the permission before they complete the merger or the acquisition. In coming to the threshold, there are two types of tests that CCI does. First is the parties test. So the target company and the buyer. So it always excludes the selling or the seller company. So parties test is restricted up to your 20 billion. All of it is in INR. It's where it is very global market. I have put USD along with INR. So parties, when they have a combined domestic asset which will exceed 20 billion, or when they have a combined domestic turnover exceeding 60 billion, or when they have a combined worldwide asset exceeding 10 billion, or when they have a worldwide turnover combined which exceeds 30 billion. So all of this is in INR, and this is the place where most of the chartered accountants are entirely required to tell us lawyers that yes, you can put this is your account statement and this is what you should put in. So whenever you have the law firms making a diligence report without this report, it's impossible literally to go ahead. So this is the parties test. Parties test is just looks if a company, that is the purchasing company and the target company together will have an impact on the market, particularly if they have a presence which exceeds 20 billion. Now, when you have more than one, so then that becomes your group test when you have conglomerate mergers or conglomerate acquisitions. The group test essentially, again, it excludes the selling company or the seller company, and it just looks into the target as well as the parent company, that is your holding company. If it's a group company, then the domestic assets will have to exceed 80 billion for CCI to even take cognizance of. Where the domestic turnover combined between the target and the group will have to exceed 240 billion. So you see, each one of these figures are figures that CCI sets for itself. It is not something that is given by the market, rather it sets, and I would very much like to believe it resets from time to time. These are the thresholds that once it triggers, you have to report it. You cannot stay quiet. So if the moment you give the application is the next steps that I'll be doing. So the moment, what happens is, the moment you give the application, the CCI then sometimes just sits on it, and after a period of time it will say all is fine. So it's almost like, you know, your visa applications. When you do your visa application, we all think that, oh, it's such an important test and I don't know what they'll be verifying. But essentially what they do is they throw your application at the back door and they wait out for a period of time. If there is no complaint, if there is no objections given, your visa is through. At least that is what has been informed to me by my friends who work in these foreign offices. They say, well, no, there is no rocket science to visa. So I do believe CCI also has that similar policy, because many a times that is what they do. When we speak of your test, when we speak of your group test, or when we speak of the parties test, once these applications reach the examination of the application, or that is the valuation of the assets, the valuation report of the assets, or the report of the turnover, it has to be as per the relevant accounting principles of the land. It can be here or it can be in other jurisdiction, because when we speak of acquisition, you can also have a foreign company acquiring and having a presence in India. So it does look into the consolidated value of assets. So whenever you look into the parties test, the complete value of the assets or the turnover of the immediate parties is taken into account. Similarly, when you look into the group test, the parent company, that is your what is this called? 1 second, sorry guys. I'm truly technologically challenged. Okay, something is happening with my screen. I don't know if it's visible, but that should be fine as long as you can see the slide. So the group test is where the sorry. Okay. So the group test is where the test is of the ultimate parent or the ultimate holding company. So the thresholds of that holding company is considered by the by the CCI, and then it comes to its notification. So this notification is where the acquirer, or in a merger, both the companies file for the notification from CCI saying that, well, we need permission for doing this merger and or for undergoing this acquisition. And this notification of CCI is absolutely mandatory if these trigger points are touched. So these thresholds, if they are crossed, the application to CCI is a must. The notification from CCI is a must before you can have your transaction being completed. Now, this notification, for doing this notification, there is a certain process. What is the process? So you have generally a form 1 or a form 2. Form 1 is a lot more cheaper than form 2. Form 2 is a lot more expensive than form 1. So long form is used wherever there are combinations which essentially get into more than 15% of the market. So if you are having a combined market share is 15% in any horizontal market, in such a situation, you will necessarily have to use the long form. Similarly, if in a merger where either the individual or combined market share of the market is more than 25%, again you will have to use the long form. Now, I believe in the short form, I think it will be 1.5 million that you will have to file. The filing fees in long form, it's a bit more. I think I don't remember, but yeah, the filing fees is lot more stiffer for form 2. So in case of I'm sorry guys, just give me 1 minute. So in case of acquisition, the acquirer has to file the fees, and in case of merger, it is the joint responsibility. Any questions so far?
Yes, there's one question. I'll just read it out. Could you please explain
Yes.
if these thresholds are applied to the buyer or the company being bought?
The buyer and the company being bought under CCI are the same, one and the same. No individual is recognized. It is the company acquiring or the company merging is the company or the parent company that is seen. So when we speak of buyer or when we speak of seller, we talk essentially about companies. We do not talk about individual business people. Have I been able to answer the question?
I hope so. That is the one question that came up.
Okay. Thank you. So let's now move to this stop clock period. So stop clock period is this obligation to suspend. Stop clock period is a fancy term that we just simply say just to, it's an ease of address. So this obligation to suspend is the moment you put in an application with CCI. CCI will need certain time to review the transactions, and typically it allows itself a review of 210 calendar days from the date of notification, that is from the date of application. So this 210 days is inclusive of the time taken by the parties to provide information or to complete filing. And beyond this 210 days, if for review CCI requires any extra time, an additional period of 60 days is provided. So the reason why we call it the clock stop period is because the entities will not be able to progress with the transaction till this is completed. This entire process of CCI is carried out in two parts. The first part, that is the investigation part. CCI can issue a prima facie opinion that this transaction will cause or will not cause an appreciable adverse effect on the competition in the relevant market. So for this, it has a period of 30 days from the date of application. In most of the cases, it will not find a AAEC, so then it will approve the transaction. So this period is known as, this is the period that I was saying they will, the review period of the application is the period when they wait for objections to come, they wait for the review study to come. When the review study is all positive in such a situation, you already will have a positive information from CCI which says that yes, the transaction is unlikely to cause any adverse effect and hence should be able to go through. So the entire time period for this is essentially 30 days, but if it has any adverse effect, then it increases. Same way, what happens is where the CCI thinks that there can be certain remedies which can be brought about to correct the process or to correct the position, it will suggest those remedies. The companies can seek informal guidance from CCI on how to go about, and all of this would be in addition to this time period that is statutorily permitted. So this stop clock or this pause period will essentially stop, or it'll the 210 days, it'll bring a stop to it if CCI invalidates, that is if an application is given incomplete, or if there is any lack in the application, or there has to be serious remedies in the application, then CCI will instruct the companies to give a fresh filing or to complete the filing. So the period will stop counting from that date and will resume only when the complete set of documents is provided to CCI. The second part. So second part is the serious or the troubling part. So this is where the Competition Commission actually opines that this acquisition or this merger is going to create an appreciable adverse effect on the competition. If it so happens, if it forms such an opinion based upon the documents submitted by the companies, in such a situation, CCI will extend its investigation period. It's no longer calls it a review, we'll call it an investigation period, and will extend it to 210 days, and it will start digging into the companies and will ask for more documents to ensure that there is no adverse effect in the past that has been perpetrated by these companies. Once this investigation is so-called investigation is complete, then either the CCI has to mandatorily approve, disapprove, or propose modification. So this is what I was saying. Whenever they feel that there is additional documentation to be required, or if they feel that there are certain remedies that they need to put in such a situation, they will extend the time period for the companies to enable the companies to do the necessary filling up of the gaps, and this will be in addition to the statutory time period. So here in modifications, it's 60 days is provided for. Sometimes a little bit more is also provided for on an appeal, but an investigation or in-depth investigation is absolutely binding if there is a prima facie, that is on the face, opinion of CCI that any such acquisition or merger will have a serious impact on the market. So far, this is the whole element of your merger and the whole element of your acquisition. I hope I have been able to explain this, because right now what has happened is I will be moving to a little bit to explain what is the other side of the coin. So whenever I have been speaking of this adverse effect or on the economy or on the competition, your appreciable adverse effect on competition, AEC, that stems primarily from a dominant position. Now, dominant position has not been clearly said anywhere that what is a dominant position, but what is abuse of dominance has been defined, explained, and academicians have written reams of papers on that, on what is an abuse of dominance. So abuse of dominance is nothing but the other face or the other side of the same coin of your AAEC. So as I was saying, AAEC has been the basic fundamental leg on which the entire case of merger acquisition or your anything else of the amalgamations of your CCI stands on. The whole element of CCI's approval stems only from if there is an AAEC or if there is no AAEC. How do you come or how do you figure out that there is a appreciable adverse effect? That is very easily provided for. If you see here in the process, CCI says that well, it will form a prima facie opinion on whether the transaction is likely to cause an appreciable adverse effect on competition in the relevant market. Now, there are few things that is important here to understand. First and foremost, what is a relevant market? Is it a geographical or is it a non-geographical market? That is the product based market that we are looking into? Is it when the other element is of your appreciable adverse? So what is this appreciable adverse effect that we are looking into? So definition of these is very, very, very lucid. It's very constant flowing. It's very ambiguous in the sense that how do you define what is a relevant market? Now let's take relevant market. Say, let's say for example, I've developed an app. Now what is the relevant market? So there is, you cannot put a geography on it. But at the same time, if I cater to any business, like for example, supply chain or I don't know, delivery of products. So it's a very geographic specific product. Similarly, if you look into the telecom sector, so again, it's a very geographic specific market. So whenever we speak of adverse effect, it has to be closely looked into who can create or which company is in a position to create such adverse effect. Quite obviously, the company that is seen, perceived to be in a dominant position would be the company that would be able to create such an effect. It won't be a company that has started new. It won't be a company that does not have a very strong position in the market that will create an adverse effect. It will always be the dominant company. So does it mean that whenever this dominant company wants to extend its business, that it will create an adverse effect on the competition? It may not. As I had said right in the beginning, the whole element of your competition commission stems from providing a viable choice or an option to the consumer. So if you look into the telecom market over the last half a decade, a lot has changed in the telecom market with the entry of new players. Some of the existing players have got destabilized. Some of them had to close their business down or have had to sell off their businesses to other players in the same market. And all of that was primarily with the entry of one new player. So this one new player, even though it was a new entrant to the market, it brought about a game-changing scenario in the market. So this dominant position is a very difficult concept to define. So if you're a new entrant to the market, would you call that new entrant as a having a position of dominance? So how do you define a position of dominance, and where does the abuse come from? Or how do you define even the abuse of that position? So all of that is seen with on the impact of the player or of the business house on the market. Now let's take for example Oyo. When Oyo came, or when Byju's entered into the education field, they were game changers. They were absolutely new to the market. The concept was different. The concept was new. They were not even seen as competition for a very long time. Hence, their acquisitions did not trigger CCI, but the latest acquisition by Byju's of Aakash did trigger CCI's thresholds, and it had to take permission. So you see, it is, you cannot say new player and old existing player or old player or the deep pockets of any player versus the other players. It's more about how dominant they can be. Now there are few tests of dominance that we have. First and foremost test, can you underwrite? Can you underprice your product to such a limit that it drives away all the competition? Can you ruin your competition just by your pricing factor? Can you ensure that none of your consumers would choose your competition primarily by running them away from the ground? So I'm putting it in a very normal language, in the sense that how to recognize what's a dominant position. Having said that, as I said, there is no way you can identify that this party would be the dominant player in the market till it starts playing actually. So this appreciable adverse effect that we speak of, that goes hand in hand with your abuse of dominant position in the CCI. Um, will it be okay if I take a small break here? We can come back in like
Yes,
5 minutes.
Yes. I will share my screen.
Okay. Yes, please.
Screen visible? Okay.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
Can we start?
Yes, please. Yes.
I'll give you the presenter rights. Now we can start sharing. Yeah, visible.
Yeah. So, any questions? Are there any questions so far with regard to this adverse effect?
Yeah, I'll share my screen if there's 2 questions on that.
Yes.
So my screen is visible, right? The 3rd and 4th question.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any mergers that prevented by CCI? Yes. Yes. There have been some mergers that have been prevented by CCI. I'll just pause the presentation and how do I pause the presentation and I'll go to the CCI website. I'll give that answer in a minute. The next question is it?
No, you can search. Since I'm sharing a screen,
Pardon?
you can. Since I'm sharing.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Got it. So yes, CCI has been very active. If anything, in India, it has tied up with a lot of academic institutions as well in the progress of its finding out about how to apply and all those things. And I don't know why it's not opening. I'll get to it in a minute. So the next question: does a post acquisition or a takeover by acquirer when opposed by acquirer trigger CCI laws? That is, well, in India, it's really difficult, if not impossible, to have a forced acquisition. Primarily because of your SAST 2011, your substantial acquisition of your shares and takeovers. That defines your creeping acquisition, that defines your and it makes it mandatory to give a public notice. There is very little scope, if any, to have a forced acquisition. So this concept of hostile takeovers has become a very foreign idea in India, thanks to SEBI. So this is what I always say, that SEBI as a regulator somewhere has become so protective of its it has become so protective of the investors that it even color codes the risk of each of the investments. So no, we cannot have forced acquisition, or we do not have forced takeovers, to answer briefly. But if it touches the thresholds, then yes, it would have to be reported to CCI by default. So this reporting to CCI is not a choice that the companies have. They touch upon the thresholds of either be it of turnover or be it of your profits. You'll have to report it to CCI. Okay, now, so for some reason the Competition Commission website itself is not opening, but I'll just open another document of mine and I'll just give you that answer. So there have been few. One of the cases, I think I had mentioned it in the slide itself, that is your Cement Manufacturers Association. That was, of course, a cartelization case, but when you have your abuse of dominance, you had your DLF case, you had your Kataria case. So all of those cases wherein the CCI had essentially said that, well, you cannot go ahead with such amalgamation, or you cannot go ahead with such an acquisition. having said that, I'll have to say that acquisitions made under IBC, under your resolution plan or by a resolution applicant, will get exempted, even though they will have to acquire the approval. This acquiring of approval has to be prior to the submission of the resolution plan. So that is a small gray area that you have with regard to like this question. If this question, that's post acquisition, while there cannot be a forced acquisition, there can be an acquisition where you do an acquisition against the will of the company through the CIRP process. In such a situation, the CCI permission would be required if you suspect that by such acquisition of the company and its assets, you would be crossing the thresholds. And the moment you have an idea that you'll be crossing the thresholds, you will need to obtain the approval of the CCI before you submit the resolution plan to the COC, because the COC is not going to recognize a resolution plan that does not have the approval of the CCI. So this is a typical chicken and egg situation that arises sometimes, and the CCI will not be able to give approval because you are not a successful resolution applicant, and yes, the other way around as well. The other element that makes a difference is where you have your non-compete clauses. So while it is not a forced acquisition, you still have something that is known as a non-compete clause, which becomes very critical, or it becomes one of the thresholds for CCI to report whether this company should or should not get a clear certificate. Because in non-compete clauses, you can have anything. You can have your exclusive supply chain contracts, you can have your specific licensing agreements, you can have non-solicitation clauses. So in a non-compete clause, you can put in anything that you want to, and all of those clauses somewhere would have an impact on the business, on the geographical market, as well as the relevant market as is seen by the CCI. And hence, whenever any company goes in for an amalgamation or goes in for any sort of vertical agreements, all of such non-compete clauses become very, very important in the review of CCI. It does follow the threshold rule, true, that is your de minimis or the basic minimum threshold to be followed, but at the same time, it has to review any such non-compete clauses. Without it, it cannot simply give a clear certificate to the company saying that yeah, there is no problem with the amalgamation, do go ahead. So that license or that permission from CCI will be something that is absolutely critical. Okay. So now, okay, so that seems, or is there another question? Do I see another question? No, that is it, I think.
We'll give you the personal rights back.
Okay. So let me go to my slide. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as I was, so going back to where I stopped before, this appreciable adverse effect and your abuse of dominant position. Your abuse of dominant position, as I was saying, is the other face of the same coin of appreciable adverse effect. This test of dominance. So this is what I was wanting to explain before I took a break. So this test of dominance is a very, very, very difficult test. Primarily, as I was explaining, how do you test the dominance of a player who's a new entrant, or how do you test the dominance of a player that would roll out in future, maybe through amalgamation or maybe through, so it is just a, how do you say, a projected perception rather than anything else. So the Competition Act itself, it defines the dominant position as a position of strength. It defines the position that is enjoyed by the enterprise in the relevant market. Again, the meaning of relevant market is something that needs to be understood, which it enables. So whenever we speak of AAEC, we have to understand what it means in contrast with the dominant position and in the context of relevant market. So it has to have a freedom of operating independently of its competition. It should there is some disturbance, I think. It should be able to affect its competition, or it should be able to have an impact on its consumers in its favor. So in doing this, while the market share or the market reach of the player is important, the definition of relevant market becomes very, very critical. As I was explaining, when you speak of relevant market, it can be both geographical as well as non-geographical, depending upon the product or the service that the company is providing. So this, when we speak of dominance, abusive dominance, it's something that is very, very difficult. While if it is a fixed product or a fixed service, it's easy to explain that this such and such firm is concerned with supply of product or supply of service, and these are the conditions for its market. Wherever you have a vague market, wherever you have a market that cannot be defined or constrained or regulated, that is where you would run into trouble with your relevant market definition. But to be honest, this relevant market definition is not a concept that has been giving trouble just to the Indian Competition Commission, but across the world, the concept of relevant market has always given trouble to regulators, because it is one of the most important markers. It is one of the most important markers for the purposes of defining dominant position. It has been one of the most important markers for the definition of, or to identifying an appreciable adverse effect. So any analysis of any threshold or any application, you cannot complete it without completing the research, or you cannot complete it without looking into what the relevant market is. So for example, if an application for amalgamation reaches ECI, before it can even give a clear certificate or a notification, it has to first identify what is the relevant market. Similarly, if it raises an objection, it has to raise an objection based upon the definition of relevant market. So for doing this, to define a company to be a dominant company, the CCI will have to primarily look into the concept of what a relevant market is. And the guidelines for relevant market is not very, very easily available. It's in form of guidance notes. So to reach a conclusion on what a relevant market is, it usually will require a detailed economic analysis. It will require analysis of the market, of the economic activities. It is not a definition that gives in very easily. So usually what CCI does is it looks both into the geographical as well as the non-geographical market. So in the geographical market, it look into the time element, like its launch and those things. And at the non-geographical market, it look into the money or the capacity of the product, the reach of the product to its consumers. So this, once CCI identifies its relevant market, what it does is then it starts to define the dominance or how dominant a company is. So this dominance is easy, much more easy once you have defined your or reached the conclusion on what a relevant market is. So the dominance is basically defined as the power of the company in reaching out to its consumers on parameters such as price, supply, distribution, and production. So whether they can do it independently or are they interdependent with other players in the market. So of dominance. So India, the more dominant, the less dominant they are because of the interdependence. So actions, it's positive. The more dangerous, and the will have an abuse. So abuse is something that I've always spoken about it, written about it. Break it down to its simplest meaning. What it comes is, whenever you have a dominant company, essentially the recognition points will be, if does it engage in a conduct that in such a conduct that it would by default eliminate or restrict the entry of a competitor? Will it stop any new future player to step in and be part of the market participant? Will it substantially reduce, will it substantially prevent any player from spreading out its business? So these are the parameters that you can easily check whether a company is dominant or not. If a company is dominant, let's say they have cleared what a relevant market is, and then they have cleared what a um, dominant position is. Now, whether there is dominance, how do you recognize this abuse of dominance? Now, there is a flyer which has been given by CCI, which essentially explains what abuse of dominance is. And abuse of dominance has been very clearly defined under your section 4 of your act. It speaks about the trade practices indulged by the company, whether the company has violated or has not violated the position that has been given to it by the by the by the market. So whatever tantamounts or amounts to abuse of dominance is very interesting, because it can be both direct dominance or it can be an indirect abuse of dominance. So it can be any unfair discriminatory practices, any practice that restricts its competitors, any practice that limits its competitors can be termed as abuse of dominance. As I was saying, with relevant market, you had certain parameters. With dominance, you had certain parameters. For abuse of dominance too, you have certain parameters. So it's the same parameters of dominance that is seen for abuse of dominance. That do you have a major chunk of your market share, the size and asset of the undertaking or the company that you're about to purchase, any vertical agreements that you have with your suppliers. All of each one of these will be elements that would look into whether there is an abuse of dominance or not. So the moment you have abuse of dominance, So these are the three legs that the Competition Commission has to cross before it gives a clear certificate for merger acquisition. Then comes the most important test, that is your market share test. So what is a market share test? A market share test is again a very, very interesting test, and it's one of the more ambiguous tests that it looks into determination on how much a company or the market reach of a market for a particular product or service of a company is there, and how to identify that market. So this market test is essentially one of the tests that CCI looks into for um, checking up on the abuse of dominance. Wait, I think, yeah, sorry. So this abuse of dominance or abuse of dominant position, as we see, we speak of, it's primarily these are the elements that I was talking about. It speaks about imposing of unfair or discriminatory conditions. It can be something as simple as predatory pricing. When we speak of predatory pricing, please do bear in mind it can also be undercutting of the competitors. So many a times you would find that the companies, while they will not announce a predatory pricing, what they will announce is a limited time offer for pricing. So that will not come under the definition of predatory pricing, but rather a gaining of subscriptions or your consumers. So one of the most interesting element would be your refundable deposits. So you give a deposit, you get all your services. Like I think most of the mobile service providers now provide. So if you take a certain plan, you get a lot of freebies with it. So none of it, while all of it amounts to a certain pricing, it will not come under the definition of predatory pricing. To get into the definition of predatory pricing, they would essentially have to undercut the actual value. That is, say for example, to produce a product I have to spend 10 rupees. If I'm pricing it at 8 rupees, that essentially is underpricing. That means I am forfeiting, forget about the profit, even my cost, to peg it at such a level that my competitors will have to essentially bleed themselves to match my price. That is called your predatory pricing. So whenever any company indulges for a period of time, a length of period of time, in any unfair or any discriminatory conditions, preconditions to providing its goods or services, or it provides a pricing that undercuts its basic cost of the product or services, in such a situation, that is an absolute indicator that there is a abuse of dominant position. Similarly, whenever you have a restriction, be it a limitation or a restriction on the services to be provided, or the technical or scientific know-how to be shared, uh, all of that, if it tantamounts to prejudice to consumers, it would be abuse of dominant position. Now let's take the example. Let's discuss here the example of Apple products. So Apple products, particularly iPhone, has been in criticism for the longest while, that by default of its design, a lot of third-party apps cannot be downloaded or used on an iPhone because of the security system, so-called security system or integrity that it provides to its consumers. An Apple product, as long as it was not permitting use of third-party apps, was seen as abusing its dominant position. So at some point of time, it was forced to permit third-party applications on its platform, but then it has a very restrictive way of permitting third-party applications on its platforms. So yes, it did come under the definition of abuse of dominance. Microsoft too came under the definition of abuse of dominance. Um, so they all came about primarily with regard to your technical uh, conditionalities that they put for using of their products. Similarly, whenever a practice results in denial of a market or denial of access to any particular market, that too can be defined as a abuse of dominance. Any questions with regard to abuse of dominance?
No, ma'am. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So what we have is, I'll just move to the CCI website once more and see if it has opened. As I was saying, the whole idea of your CCI is essentially to ensure that there is a clear protection to the market. The whole idea is the consumers or the customers have to be protected from anti-competitive behavior. They have to be protected from anti-consumer activities, and in particular if there is a merger and acquisition involved therein. Now, I don't know if any one of you recall the acquisition or the acquisition of or the merger of your Airtel with Tata Teleservices. No? So mergers, while, as I was saying, with the threshold limits, while yes, there have been threshold limits, and yes, CCI does look into it, there have been certain developments in the sense that there have been certain mergers or proposed mergers which have actually gone through very easily, which could very easily equally fall in these parameters. Your Vodafone and Idea, the merger, that it got an unconditional approval almost as soon as it was applied. Same thing had happened with your Bharti Airtel and your teleservices. Your Tata Steel with Bhushan, if anybody has been a practicing IP would know about it. Both Bhushan Steel and Bhushan Power, they got absolute clearance certificate from CCI. In fact, CCI fast-tracked those approval processes just to ensure that that the resolution CRP process would go through easily. So so far, if I don't have any questions, I think I have come to the end of your presentation, in the sense that the merger acquisition. Sorry.
So the presentation is completed, ma'am? Done, right?
Yes, I mean, I was hoping for a little bit of discussion and questions, because it's a topic which essentially requires a lot of discussion, and
Yes.
because of which I thought I will have enough and sufficient time, and I'll discuss each one of these elements. Because with discussion, what happens, like if you see the threshold limits that I was giving, there you would have very clearly many elements that needs to be explained. Okay, I'd also promised that I will discuss the builders, the cement manufacturers case. Wait, let me just pull out that one.
And there is one question on the behavioral remedies, 6th one.
Kindly explain behavioral remedies in accepting or rejecting an application. When we speak of behavioral remedies, it means any lacking in the application, in the sense that if there is any remedies that is suggested by the CCI to the applicant, be it of an amalgamation or be it of a merger. So in the diligence reports or anything, if they need to do any remedies, that would always be given as either as an informal guidance note, or directly if the application has already been made. So many a times before applying, there would be an informal guidance note that would be sought from the CCI to enable them to give a complete filing. So it is not very advisable to give an inadequate or an incomplete filing, because then it simply extends your timeline and increases the period of work. But every time, so anytime before a major merger deal goes through, there would be an informal guidance taken prior to it. A merger deal, once it has got concluded, there's a lot of paperwork that comes through. They have to do their listing agreements, they would have to go in through your disclosure requirements, they would have to shareholder consent forms, you have to have your creditor consent forms. Once all of this is in place, you would also need to take the CCI approval. So before you go to the CCI, what you would do is you would take an informal guidance to figure out if any of the things are lacking. So if you have all the AGMs and everything in place, all the minutes of it in place, there are no red flags, then perhaps an informal guidance note is not required. But even if there are few red flags or any red flags, you would necessarily have to resort to a guidance note and then file. So these behavioral remedies are remedies that are suggested by the CCI for towards completion of the application that is submitted for approval. How does this act? Government monopolies is exempt. So yeah, I was actually anticipating this. Both your banking sector and your government is absolutely exempt. Government has every right to have monopoly in business. Like if it did not, your railways would squarely come under it. But thankfully, the act itself says that it'll not deal. It'll just deal with the private players in the market. So government, no, it will not apply. What are the opportunities for CAs in practice of Competition Act for? Okay, I'm sorry, I missed one more question. Threshold limits are lower worldwide compared to domestic. They're not lower, I would say. They are not particularly too lower as compared to worldwide. It depends upon the relevant market. So even in India, if you see, if you look into the thresholds, if it is a group company, it is a lot more higher than that you would find for individual companies. So it depends upon the relevant market. It depends upon the business and the type of business. But yes, the basic minimum thresholds are always rolled out by the CCI. And then comes here what opportunities for CAs. CAs are absolutely indispensable in mergers and acquisition. As I was telling you before, any law firm that does any merger deal cannot do it without having a chartered accountant on with it. So all the documentation will have to be up to date with the latest accounting principles or accounting standards that is announced by your body from time to time. So CAs have a major role to play when it comes to mergers and acquisitions. It's 1% of it is law, 90% of it is numbers, and lawyers are very, very bad at number crunching. So we do need accountants there. Okay, the next is very interesting. Amazon abusing its power as mere e-commerce platform by having a stake in Appareo. Well, it has got Appareo and it has got one more, Cloudtail. Yeah, Cloudtail, by pushing products from this sellers as best sellers and hurting other small businesses even after notices from CCI. Well, that's true. That's true. So Appareo Retail, apparently they have some form of joint venture, whereas Cloudtail is a company that they have SPV that they have created. And yeah, they do push products from sellers. But if I don't know if you recall, Amazon, when it came into the Indian market, it essentially pushed all its own products without making any distinction. And at a later point of time, when the Supreme Court came down upon it, it said, well, we are just an aggregator. So an aggregator, it cannot push any seller, nor can it can it downgrade any seller. But this bestseller, this tag of bestseller, is a very, very interesting mechanism that they have. It depends upon consumer reviews, and they do not say bestseller. What they say is recommended by Amazon. So whenever you have recommended by Amazon, it apparently it's based upon some form of algorithm which takes the consumer feedback and purchases and satisfaction reports, and based upon it they recommend the product to future consumers. But at the same time, it cannot force you to buy, and because it cannot force you to buy, it is not precisely an abuse of dominant position. So notwithstanding who says what, please remember that until unless it extinguishes your choice, it will not come in the radar of CCI. Okay, so these are the few questions that I have. So I'll just go to the cartel market. So cartel market in India has been there from time immemorial. You have the car tires manufacturers, you have the cement cartel, you have rigged biddings at almost every auction, be it by the banks, by the government, by the railways, everywhere you almost have a rigged up bidding. So very, very, very few places which have a genuine auction. So one of the cases, the cartel case that I wanted to discuss is the cement manufacturers. So cement manufacturing is a very interesting business in India. You have very, very few players in the cement manufacturing business. You had the merger case, I don't know again if you recall, of Holcim India, and there these shares were swapped, and LIC was a minority shareholder who raised a stink and said that, well, this is against the minority protection and everything, but yet the deal went through. They had to change, I think, the swap ratio, but the deal went through. So this Cement Manufacturers Association, they had a huge fight with the Builders Association. And of course, when two different businesses they fight, they reach one regulator or the other, and these two they reach the Competition Commission. And Competition Commission then evaluated all the evidences placed. It came to the conclusion that yes, the cement manufacturers were actually colluding with each other with regard to pricing. So they held that the evidences placed are indicative that the opposite parties met frequently, and they met frequently at events organized by the Cement Manufacturers Association, and used those platforms to essentially discuss all the details of production capacity, pricing, and they created a price parallelism, which means that while there was no clear collusion with regard to the price were almost always mirrored with each other. So whenever you have a clear running of price, which is a mirror of each other of competing businesses, there can be just one conclusion that exists a collusive behavior, and such coordinated behavior is nothing but a clear indicator of your anti-competitive agreement. So similarly, you have had many such cases wherein the cartelization was a huge thing which the CCI has came down very heavily upon. So the whole idea of CCI is to protect the market. not the market players, but protect the market to protect the consumers. So in the cement cartel case, of course, the builders or the builders association was one of the major consumers. I have some time, don't I have, sir? I still have some time, don't I?
Yes, yes, sir, yes,
There is
yes, ma'am.
one, yeah. So when about this collusive behavior, there is one thing I would like to explain. That is,
Do you want to
one
screen
second.
share, ma'am? Give you the rights.
Wait. No, I don't need the screen share. One second. I'm just trying to go to the internet. 1 minute, sir. Uh, sir. Yeah. So in the past, had explained about this collusive behavior and horizontal agreements. So this cartelization or charging of mirrored prices is a very good example of your um, collusive behavior or cartelization. The element that CCI sees is there are there, there are few elements that CCI sees as a marker, and in particular in the cement case, it had a look at. First, it saw that they have a very active trade association. So the Cement Manufacturers Association provided the platform for all the manufacturers to essentially come together and discuss. So it provided a platform. So that was the first red flag that CCI saw. The next that they saw was that there was a very high dependence of the consumers on the product. So besides these 4 or 5 players, there were literally no other players in the market. So by default, the markets were divided vertically or horizontally in between the players, and each of these geographical markets were never tampered by the other players. So even today, if you get into the local market, you will find that every market would have its 1 or 2 brands of cement that would be available and not any other brand. This is a very interesting concept which was unknown to me till I decided to do renovations of my place. And that is where I realized that, well, if you want X brand of cement, you'll have to go to certain place which is outside these limits, only then you get. So that is still there. So this high dependence of consumers and breaking up of markets was a bigger next red flag that CCI saw. Almost all the manufacturers, doesn't matter where they had their factories or where they have their factories, have fairly similar production cost. They have fairly similar conditions for production. They have similar very parallel high entries or high exit barriers, and they have had a deep history of collusive behavior. So these 5 red flags were essentially the flags that alerted CCI in that particular case and said that, well, this is a very it's a very revealing thing that this cement cartel is present, and it gave a judgment against it. Now, whenever you have either cartelization or whenever you have collusive behavior or anti-competitive behavior, CCI has something fairly interesting. It provides a leniency program. What is a leniency program? A leniency program is almost similar to a whistleblower program. So whenever you have a company which is part of the cartel and they want to step out of the cartel, the one way they can step out of the cartel is by reporting voluntarily suo motu to CCI. By doing this, CCI provides them with immunity or provides them with a lenient treatment, so that the cartel breaks. So your Competition Act, which provides for leniency program, does not let them off with no penalty. It lets them off with a much lesser penalty than others. So it is almost like a whistleblower program where the person who blows the whistle will still get punished, but of a much lighter sentence than a person who would otherwise would not have come and reported it. Why does the Competition Commission do this, or why does it roll out this leniency program? It rolls out the leniency program to essentially break the cartels from inside. So suspicion of cartel and establishment of cartel, they are very time consuming, resource consuming and intense procedures. So by providing this incentive of leniency programs, they essentially try to break the cartels from inside out. This many a times is explained in terms of your game theory or your prisoner's dilemma. You don't know what your other partner is going to speak of, but if you speak out the crime, quite possibly you would be held guilty. But if both of you keep quiet, both of you will be held not guilty. If one of you speaks, the other person will get a higher punishment and you'll get a lower punishment, the person who spoke. So if both of you do speak out together, then both of you get the same punishment. Perhaps it won't be as harsh as it would be. So this prisoner's dilemma, or the game theory, that is seen as the basis for the leniency program. That is what I wanted to speak. But there are certain elements of leniency theory. The first point is, in leniency theory, to avail this leniency, you cannot report an investigation that has already is in the process of investigation. That means it has to be fresh, it has to be new. The person who is part of this disclosure cannot continue to cooperate, cannot discontinue to cooperate till the proceedings is completed. Next, the Competition Commission has to satisfy itself that it is not a false evidence, that the disclosure made by the member is a vital disclosure. It is not a easy disclosure that can be very brushed off very easily. If they do so, they would be held by the commission and they would be tried for that offense. So the Competition Commission tries a very carrot and stick approach when it comes to controlling or guarding the market from adverse effect from the different market players. While it lays down detailed processes and procedures, it also rolls out incentives for your whistleblowers in the market. It has come out with lesser penalty regulations, which will incentivize players who are in collusive behavior to come step up and essentially disclose to the CCI that this is anti-competitive behavior that they have been indulging in, and they would restrain themselves from indulging it in future only and only if they could somehow get away with this one. So yes, so as I was saying, this abuse of dominance or your cartelization, all of that is there. In addition to it, it also incentivizes the very people who are players in that market to step up and, well, to say that we are not going to do any more of such things. Yes, sir. Now it's over to you. If there are any questions, I would be very happy to take the questions.
Anurag sir, over to you, sir. Out of this. Unmute yourself.
Yes, sir.
Questions are attended, madam. All the questions then and there.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
okay.
Questions are exhausted. I think. Thank you very
I'm
much.
really sorry, sir. I could not do it till 8 p.m.
No,
Because
not
I
right.
genuinely
No, it was 5 to 7 only, madam. It was 5 to 7.
5 to 7. Oh, I've been informed that it is 5 to 8.
No,
And
5 to
so
7.
I kept a lot of areas for questions.
You have done more than justice, madam, because this is one area where normally CS are not breaking the heads into, but now because
Yes.
of the demand of the situation, we are
Yes, sir.
forced to enter into the new areas of practice also, because they are related to business also. It's only CS who can understand the accounting and taxation part of the businesses and also finances.
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely,
in
absolutely.
addition to that, slightly marketing and competition and all these things, definitely with the statistics, there will be the best people to present a case before the authorities. So, thank you very much for covering
Right.
this competition act in such a short time, so lucidly, and also you have explained the things in such a wide manner that most of the areas are covered, including the answering the questions that were there. Additionally, we are very happy to have a professor's lecture, that too from a national law college in you. So we're all really lucky to have you today, and our questions also were all the members' questions also were answered, and I think most of the attendees are fully benefited from your talk today. So on behalf of SIRC, Southern India Regional Council of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, in the capacity as secretary, I thank you very much for your time and presentation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It's an honor
So
to be here. Thank you so
thank
much.
you. So we'll be in touch with you, madam. Thank you all the delegates who have attended today and made use of this presentation, and also the participation from your side is the real inspiration for us to conduct such programs, innovative programs with new speakers like Madam Anita Patnaik ji. This would not have been possible had it been physical meeting across the region, across the profession. Both have happened today, so it is one of the most happiest today of our CP programs today. Thank you all, and also I thank the chairman for selecting this topic in absentia, and also Mr. Abhishek who joined here to introduce the speaker for the day, and SRC staff behind the back office, and the technical hand, Mr. Selva. Thank you all. Good night.
Thank
Stay
you, sir.
safe.
Good
Stay
night, sir.
safe. Thank you.